Archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of Golden Era.
Hello and welcome to my series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today is a leading French businessperson who has combined his passion for business with a deep commitment to global citizenship. He is chairperson of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and the cement firm Lafarge. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Bertrand Collomb. Welcome to this program. Sustainable development, business, isn't it all sort of finally a question of equity between rich and poor nations? Rich nations and big business there wants to consume more energy and more power. You have the Kyoto Protocol. You have all kinds of sort of arrangements.
Well,
really to try and get around this question of equity.
I think big business doesn't use energy for its own right. Big business or small business uses energy for the needs of a consumer. So it's not so much an issue of big business versus other people. It is sometimes an issue of poor versus rich, because the rich people consume more resources than the poor. So clearly the Johannesburg conference showed that it was impossible to discuss sustainable development or even protection of the environment without discussing also the issue of poverty. And that reducing poverty in the world was probably the most important issue, and that requires economic growth. So I don't think we should oppose economic growth and sustainable development, or growth and environmental protection, or growth and social responsibility. What we need is both. We need economic growth, especially in a country like India, and we need also environmental protection. We need growth without destroying the planet, because if we destroy the planet, there will growth for us maybe, but not very long, and certainly no growth for our children, our grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. But there is a perception that the developed world, and the rich world in a sense, is already consuming so much of the environmental resource that if the poor countries began to develop anywhere near the pace of the rich, that the planet would not be able to sustain it. So in that sense, when you're talking about sustainable development in poor countries, you're asking them to make compromises and concessions that the rich are not really willing to make.
No, I know there's this perception and this fear.
How valid is that perception?
No, I don't think it is. What we are looking for is for a world where we can have economic growth and less energy consumption, for example, less CO2 emission. We won't be able to do that without using technologies which are the forefront of efficiency. Now, the industrialized countries have gone through a period where they have been polluting, they have been consuming a lot of natural resources with not a very good efficiency. Now, they have improved, they have developed new technology, and the advantage of the emerging countries is that they can shortcut this painful process that we've been through and go directly to the latest technologies. For example, New Delhi or Bombay do not need to become the Pittsburgh of the 1950s, where there was so much pollution that you couldn't see in the streets. Because at the time the anti-pollution technologies were not developed as they are now. And I think international companies which are members of WBCSD, coming from different countries, emerging countries as well as industrialized countries, can play a role because they can help all the countries to develop and use the technologies. Technologies are available in general. I mean, sometimes there are issues of patents or proprietary technologies. Most technologies are available.
But what about the cost effectiveness of these technologies in poor economies to apply these?
The main issue is to know how to use and manage the use of them, be accustomed to using them. And I think, when I look at some countries, not necessarily India actually, but I see cement plants which are very bad in terms of pollution control, very bad in terms of efficiency, of energy efficiency. And I see that in those countries, you can double the consumption of cement without doubling pollution, without doubling CO2 emissions. So I'm optimistic, because I don't think we should say that the emerging countries will do exactly the same path than the industrialized countries.
I think what we're saying is that the emerging countries are severely handicapped by global business and industrial protocols in their ability to progress rapidly, and that the same restrictions and controls that Western countries are able to manage with greater ease because of their technological superiority, their larger resources of capital, the emerging countries have greater difficulty in competing with them in a globalized marketplace.
Obviously, I don't think that we want the emerging countries to use the same approach as the industrialized countries. It is clear, for example, that the Kyoto Protocol asked France and Germany to limit their CO2 emission to an absolute level. You don't want to ask India or China to limit to an absolute level when these countries have enormous need for growth. But at the same time, you could imagine that India would have an objective of energy consumption per unit of GDP, which would be much lower now than it is, and which will probably be as low as the best industrialized countries in the future. Now, I agree with you that it's not as easy. There's a lot of education, there's a lot of commitment to research, but I see that in this country there is research in these fields. I was having a seminar with, which was sponsored by Terry, and Terry is doing research on use of energy, and there are some very good technology which are being developed here in India. So to use them is a complex, I would say, sociological issue as much as a technological issue, economic issue also. But I think the target should be to enroll emerging countries without, of course, telling them, well, we don't want you to grow because we've used so much energy or so much resources that there's nothing left for you. It is clearly not acceptable, and that's not reality either.
The World Council for Business and Sustainable Development has 175 members from 35 countries, but you have only one member from India, GAIL, and that too, it's sort of a public sector enterprise. Why do you think that Indian businesses are not responding to the kind of message that you're sending out?
We had a meeting of the BCSD of India, and there were a lot of people, and there were a lot of companies, Indian companies, who came and testified about what they were doing. So maybe a few years ago, it is right that a few companies were interested, but I think it's changing very quickly. So I hope that in the next few months, we'll have more members, global members at the WBCSD level. But I know that there are a lot of members at the Indian Council Sustainable Development level, which shows that Indian companies are taking that seriously.
You know, obviously national policies and national governments who are ostensibly at least more committed to the welfare of citizens and issues of the environment. But why should business, how can I be convinced that it is good business to be environmentally conscious and environmentally sensitive? You know, the popular perception is business wants to make money at any cost.
Well, business wants to make money, not at any cost, but that's another story. But business wants to make money in the long term. You know, a company like Lafarge has been in business for 170 years. We are not interested in a quick buck and then having a lot of problems and then not being understood by people, not being accepted by local communities, not being able to open a new quarry. If I take this very simple example, quarry, we have a lot of quarries. We know very well, if we don't rehabilitate quarries well, nobody will accept that we open a quarry anywhere. So it is become part of our business. It's part of the effectiveness of our business to be able to rehabilitate quarries well. We emit a lot of CO2. We know it's a problem. What should we do? Should we say it's not our issue? You know, we do as usual, or should we say, well, there is going to be a problem. We should work on it, we should anticipate it, we should get prepared.
But isn't this really also as much an issue of reality as it is of perception and credibility? I think few people will believe that despite legislation which requires cement companies, for example, to do reforestation and when there's quarrying or look at the issues of emission, but few imagine or few believe that that is what actually happens on the ground. You mentioned earlier that GDP wasn't really an adequate measure anymore of development. There is, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. Is there a credible, believable measure of a company's actually practiced commitment to sustainability?
I think it is very difficult to have a mathematical measure. You cannot give a figure. You can give figures for earnings. You cannot give figure for commitment to sustainable development. But you can make this commitment more objective. And one way of doing it, which is to be open to dialogue, to be transparent with the outside world, and to ask people from outside the company to tell us how good we are or how not good we are. And that's what we are doing. For example, Lafarge, my company, has a partnership with WWF, where we work with WWF to document what we are doing, to ask their advice on some of our problems, so that we are not the only ones who say, we are doing this and that, look at us, how good we are, but that we have somebody outside who is credible, who is believed and trusted by the public opinion, who tells us and other people, here you're good, here you are not as good as you should make progress, etc. So business is now more and more open into dialogue, and business is doing it because it's a necessity for business.
Why is it a necessity?
It is a necessity. A lot of people are against globalization. I believe they are mistaken. I believe globalization is good for any country, including India, and especially India. But if I'm not the only one to believe that, I'm not going to go very far. And if people believe that I'm bad, that I'm just a company which is going to exploit the resources, exploit the people, it won't last very long. So when we are in India, we have to show people that we are bringing economic progress and social progress. And so not only for our employees, but also for the people around our plants, for communities. So we do a certain number of things in communities around girl education on computer. We train masons, not because of our good heart only. We have a good heart, that happens, even in business people. but not only because of that, but also because we believe it is a condition for us being accepted as a loyal partner, as a positive partner. And there's even a step further. Unless Indian people can access to building their house, owning their house, we won't have customers. So helping them to understand how you can get a low-cost house with our materials is something which is an important business challenge for us. So really what is important is that there is a business case for sustainable development. It's not only cosmetic, it's not only communication, it is real. Now, of course, we are not perfect, nobody is perfect, so from time to time you'll find a company or business which has a sustainable development approach, which makes a mistake here and there, and you have people who are slow and people who are in the forefront. So I'm not saying everything is perfect, but I'm really convinced that there has been a change of attitude in the last 15, 20 years. Talking with all the members of our WBCSD, but talking also with the members of a global compact, the United Nations group, which is companies which commit to the 10 principles of corporate social responsibility. I can see there's much more commitment in
going back to this notion. I mean, I accept that you can't have an empirical, measurable basis, but as a concerned citizen, apart from the effectiveness of a company's public relations, how can I get a sense of what the company is really doing and how exploitive it is of the environment in particular, apart from the other social responsibility issues which you mentioned, but that is something that sort of environment affects us all.
Sure.
So what are the ways that I should judge a company?
There have to be indicators. For example, energy, CO2. We, Lafarge, have taken the unilateral commitment to reduce our emission of CO2 per ton of cement by 20% between 1990 and 2010. And we are publishing every year the number where we are.
Again, that is sort of specialized, fairly inaccessible data. as a reasonably intelligent citizen, I don't have a comparative basis.
Yeah, you do. You have, for example, the rating agencies.
Tell us about, for example, the Dow Jones
Dow Jones Sustainable, is evaluating companies along a certain number of criteria. And they do that by asking the company, but by also asking other people, NGOs, etc., and they get an opinion about how good the company is on a certain number of criteria, and they give a rating accordingly. So it's not perfect. Sometimes we are not happy about the way they do it ourselves, or sometimes some NGOs said, but no, this one is not as good as you say. But it's a process which is being improved all the time. And there's not only one, there's not only the Dow Jones Sustainable Index, there are other indices, there are other rating agencies. So eventually, if you want to build an opinion about how good Lafarge is, you go on internet, and you have at least 9 or 10 different sources. You can ask our unions, about how good we are, etc. And people do that. And actually they can document, the reality of a business.
So the World Business Council for Sustainable Development is a conglomerate of 175 odd companies from 35 countries. Are you setting guidelines? Are you setting standards? Are you setting benchmarks that the member countries should subscribe to, or is it just eloquent motivation?
We are not, we are not setting evaluation benchmarks. What we want to do is exchange best practices. We believe it's much more important to get all our companies exposed to what the other companies are doing. We had a meeting. We have once a year a council meeting where the CEOs of company come, and we had a number of CEOs recently, last week, 2 weeks ago in Amsterdam. And they spent the whole day listening to what some companies were doing, discussing issues, etc. I can tell you, when the CEO of a company participates into that type of discussion, it does have an impact on the way the company will behave. I think this is much better than us doing a ranking, saying, okay, this one is better than this one. Other people can do it. They can give awards. We are not in the business of giving ourselves awards, or ratings. Let's other people rate ourselves. We are in the business of finding solutions to problems, and finding the best practices and exchanging them, and carrying and having a momentum impact on the whole of industry, because we are only 175 companies. But I think we have computed that 2.5 billion people in the world every day use a product of a company which belongs to WBCSD. So that means we have a large impact, and by what we are doing, we believe that we can carry also a momentum in the whole business world.
When we talk about sustainable development, obviously development is a universal goal, but different communities and different cultures define development differently. You held out a support for globalization in a sense. There is Mahatma Gandhi, a great Indian icon, said it's important to get enough to meet your needs and not your greed. So when you go beyond the elimination of baseline poverty, there is a limit to growth somewhere, or is there, or isn't there?
I don't know. If you believe in technological progress, you can believe that growth can continue. And also, when a society develops, the needs are not exactly the same. The first needs are physical needs, and physical needs means natural resources. And then people go into needs which are more of a service type. They want to see videos, they want to read things, they want to interact. That requires much less natural resources than to build a house.
But ironically, when they reach that level of consumption of videos and elaborate houses, there's a deep personalization that takes place, and then there seems to be a reaching back to the more sort of elemental processes of nature and the environment.
Yeah, but even going back to the we value nature more than maybe a few decades ago. Although you shouldn't forget that the U.S., for example, in the U.S., Yosemite Valley was designed a national park, as early as 1870, or something like that. very shortly after it was discovered. So valuing nature is not something completely new. But even if, I think valuing nature and taking nature trips, etc., is going to be a form of growth. It's an economic development which is going to take a different shape. So no, I'm not necessarily saying there's a total limit of growth. Don't forget that in the 60s, the members of a club of Rome thought that we would, not have any natural resources in the next 20 or 30 years. That proved to be wrong because of technology and because of the fact that we can use our resources much better. Now, there may be a limit somewhere, but we are so far from just giving to mankind the basic things. I don't think we can really say that there should be a limit to growth when we see so many people in poverty. And just taking people out of poverty line means mobilizing a lot of resources and providing a lot of economic growth to these countries.
I think implicit in that question is if you see limits to the potential of science to continue exploiting, or let's say using, the environment in order to provide other products and goods and services that will...
I'm not sure. I think the real abuse happen when people don't know what they are doing. So if they use resources without being conscious that there's a limit, that they are limited resources, if they destroy the environment without realizing they are destroying something which they are going to suffer from, then there's a problem. As soon as we have identified the issue, I think I'm not sure there's a limit to what the intelligence of mankind can do. Now, maybe I'm optimistic, and I'm an engineer by training, so I believe in science. I believe in educated science. So if we know that there's a biodiversity issue, then we will respect, biodiversity more, and then we'll find ways around the issue, and we'll be able to develop economically without hurting biodiversity. It may be controversial because there will be no unanimity. Some people will say, biodiversity, it's just a constraint, I don't want to hear about it. But there are some issues. Look at climate change. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it was controversial. Now everybody recognizes there is an issue. We don't know yet exactly how to tackle it. And we need to tackle it by international agreement, which is even more difficult.
Does sort of the World Business Council and organizations of big business look also at sort of aspects of the development of the inner man? We're always talking about sustainable development, poverty, environment, and science, and what have you. But is there a notion of a happiness index, or?
We are business people. We are not religions. We are not philosophers. So we should not, I don't think we should, pretend that we are taking care of all the needs of man. Man has economic needs. They need goods or services, and that business can provide. But they also need other things that other people can provide. I don't think we should take an arrogant view that business can provide everything to people. Now, as a person, as a citizen, we can have our personal feelings about that, and I have some personal view about the fact that when I see, mankind being united by communication, by more and more interaction, I have a feeling that something big is happening, and that but that's personal view, that's personal philosophy. I don't think business in itself should have a.
So, do you divorce your personal philosophy from business?
I don't divorce it in as much as I believe what I do in business is consistent with my personal philosophy. I would be a very unhappy man if in business I was doing something which I believe as a person is wrong. But I do believe that what business is doing, international business is doing, is really building bridges between people.
So could I ask you sort of an unfair question and a 30-second summing up of your personal philosophy?
My personal philosophy is I believe very much that building interaction with people, having people who live who are more conscious of where they live in, who understand better the world where they live, where they can interact more with other people, and is progress. That's what I define progress. That's my personal philosophy.
Dr. Collomb, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.